I know some of you got to be looking at this and saying, what? Already? Yeah, already. And if it's your first time ever checking me out, you probably should smash that subscribe button, because all throughout the month of June, I will be doing some early scouting reports for the notable quarterback prospects looking ahead many, many months from now to the 2022 NFL Draft. Keep in mind that these are early scouting reports. These players are going to have another season and a less COVID-impacted season, and things will change and things will be different. This is just me looking more at a snapshot of what I've seen out of these different quarterback prospects, what maybe I could anticipate seeing in the year to come, and a very, very early stab, early projection is where I think these guys could potentially fall in terms of rankings for the 2022 NFL Draft. So I'm going to kick it off today talking about Sam Howell, the 6'1", 225-pound junior from North Carolina, who as a freshman was an All-American. Last season he was second team All-ACC. In his 12 games he had over 68% completion percentage, threw for over 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. So a guy that has been the dude in 2 years in North Carolina, and looking now to take that next step here in 2021 to try and stake a claim to potentially being quarterback one in next year's draft. So looking at him, watched pretty much every throw that he made in the 2020 season. Here's kind of my early preliminary takeaways. And I do want to preface this by saying, at least with him, and I'm sure as I go through other guys it might be similar, is you might see me call out more weaknesses or concerns than I do strengths. I'm trying to keep in mind, like for Sam Howell, he's a 2-year starter, but he's still only a sophomore, so you're talking about a 20-year-old fucking kid. That's the reality. So there are probably going to be more flaws than there are strengths, more weaknesses than there are strengths. There's also a thing, as some of it is me kind of nitpicking a little bit. Some of it is me trying to focus on everything, or most everything. So I might go a little more in depth than some others. As I think some of the early scouting reports that you're going to see, you'll certainly see some dudes on Draft Twitter and on YouTube that will sit there and I think go a lot more in depth. But in terms of like articles that you see written, it's going to be very, very narrow scope, like very little actual in-depth. But when I look at Sam Howell, what stands out to me is his biggest strengths, like the things that you might look at him and say, this dude could be a big-time prospect as we watch this 2021 college season unfold and we go to the 2022 NFL Draft. I think he's got plus arm strength that translates to throws all over the field. I was reading a little bit, admittedly, trying to get the vibe and see what other people thought of Sam Howell in terms of his traits, his characteristics. And I saw quite a few people, it seemed like, talk about that he had average or adequate or middling arm strength. I certainly wouldn't agree with that. I don't think he has like Mahomes level arm talent, Josh Allen level arm talent, even Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. But I think he's got more than enough arm strength to be able to make all the required NFL throws with some ease. But more than the arm strength, what really impresses me about him is he has really, really good, I'll flat out say it, great touch and timing on his deep throws. Like if you're looking at initial traits that you say, this dude is a dude that you have confidence in becoming a franchise NFL quarterback, it's the plus arm talent and it's the great touch and timing on the deep throws. Those are where you see him really shine the most. Those are the places you say, wow. Those are the places you say, that's big time, big boy, big man on campus type of shit right there. And it absolutely is. I really like, too, his ability to improvise and manufacture something kind of out of nothing. I like the fact that he can have the initial play structure kind of break down on him, and he's able to improvise, buy time, extend the play, make something out of nothing. You need that skill at the NFL level, and he's got it. And not everybody can be like that. There are quarterbacks, even really, really good ones, that primarily have to go within the structure of the play, and if it breaks down, you're in trouble. With Sam Howell, you don't have to worry about that. He also shows a good feel for moving and buying time within the pocket. And on the flip side, sometimes I think he can take too many sacks, But I will say, in terms of the feel for moving within the pocket, around in the pocket, buying himself some time, I like that part of his pocket presence. I in particularly like the way he can kind of be tough and be rigid in the pocket, in the sense of arm tackles won't necessarily bring him down. I know he's not the biggest dude in the world, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but he plays a lot bigger. Like, funny story, the first game I've watched of his in 2020 was against Notre Dame. And initially, I thought he was like 6'4". I really did, as I missed the initial graphic talking about he's more like 6'1". And I bring that up to say is that while he's not the biggest dude from a height standpoint, he looks like a grown-ass man, and to me, he looks bigger than his actual size. He plays bigger than his actual size. And he's a tough dude who's well-built, plays with a competitive fire. He's got a little bit of that fight in him, quite a bit of that fight in him, actually. And I think you see that in his game pretty consistently. Even some of the games in 2020 where North Carolina would fall down by a few touchdowns, like, he would bring the team back a little bit. He would sit there and claw in, and he wouldn't give up, and all of a sudden you look, and North Carolina's only down 7, and they got a chance. You like that type of fight, you like that type of attitude out of a guy, that kind of competitiveness, that will to win, and he certainly got it. Now, that said, I did see a number of weaknesses in his game. I think he gets happy feet in the pocket, and he bails out way too early. I think some of that might have been the so-so to shitty protection he was getting from his offensive line this past season. That could be a part of it. But he did get happy feet, and I would like to see him hang a little tougher in the pocket, give a little bit more time to allow the play to develop. He tends to lock onto his primary read, and he's slow to move to his second and third options. And I think this is going to be a bigger, larger question for Sam Howell in 2021. It's a little bit easier to lock onto your primary targets as a college quarterback when your options on the outside are Diami Brown and Daz Newsome. You got 2 NFL wide receivers, and you got 2 NFL running backs in the backfield, and Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. So you're talking about 4 NFL draft picks at the skill positions gone from this offense in 2021. But I think it does speak to sometimes that tendency to lock onto the primary target, because he was playing with really good skill talent around him. There wasn't a whole lot of need at times to have to sit there and scan and go through progressions and do all that other bullshit. His ball placement gets erratic at times. I saw people talk about he has really, really good accuracy. On the deep balls, I agree. I think his deep ball accuracy, in terms of what I saw, was outstanding. His touch, his timing, fantastic. But on some of the short and intermediate throws, it could be off sometimes. And in particular, when he gets off of his base and he's on the move, he can get way more erratic, which is a little bit of a concern. Now, you look at him and you say, with that type of arm talent and that type of abilities as a downfield thrower, sometimes you might live with some of the misses underneath. I get that, and I don't disagree with that, but it is something that will be a concern. There's also that piece when you talk about, somebody that their biggest strengths can be their biggest weaknesses. He's a tough dude. He's got a will to win. He's a competitor. He's got some fire. But that also means he's going to make some YOLO throws and YOLO decisions, and that could jump up and bite you in the NFL, especially as a young quarterback. You might not have the right read. You might think you could make a throw into a window that you absolutely cannot and should not make, and it's going to lead to some bad interceptions, particularly in the red zone. He's an average at best athlete who might not be a big running threat in the NFL. I don't want to totally dismiss him, because there is a piece that he does have kind of a feel to be able to move around, extend plays with his feet. He can jump up and surprise you as a runner, especially with some of his physicality as a runner. Again, that competitive fire and that toughness manifests because he will break some tackles. But I wonder at the NFL, when you're truly playing the best of the best athletes in the world of football, how much of a threat is he really going to be as a runner? It might be more of you buy time within the pocket and then you have to kick out and extend plays with your feet, but you're not going to be a big-time explosive threat. You'll never be a big-time explosive running threat. So I look at him, I say probably a below-average athlete, but might still have just enough to where it's not a huge asset, but it's something that you could leverage sporadically. He does get throws batted down at the line. This is one of the concerns with him being a 6'1" guy. That in and of itself should not preclude him from being a franchise quarterback. However, when you are a little bit smaller, you have to do a better job of being able to find the throwing windows. You sometimes have to get creative, and I've seen him flash at times the ability to use multiple arm angles, but sometimes he doesn't, and he's going to have to figure out here in Carolina in 21 how to locate those throwing windows better. Otherwise, he's going to get more balls batted down. It's going to lead to some questions about him at the next level. He also has moments where he double clutches and doesn't trust his eyes. Now, I don't look at this as saying like it's a Trubisky type of trait where he just absolutely cannot process or reads what he sees. That's not necessarily the case here. With a young quarterback, you'll see that. Like I talked about a little bit with Justin Fields, this, just locked on too long and just really had trouble pulling the trigger. I don't quite see that with Sam Howell. I see more of what I would expect that you could potentially coach up a little bit, throwing with a little bit more anticipation on short and intermediate throws, not always waiting to see the guy be open, trusting what he sees, trusting the play design, trusting the talent around him. So it's not like a Fields level concern or a Trubisky level concern. It's just something to call out here. I think there's also a piece, too, when you look at the structure of the offense at North Carolina in 2020, and you look at the talent around him, there were certainly times when I talk about that locking on to the primary read, and sometimes, not always trusting what he sees. There is that piece, there's that subtle nuance to his game that I think he'll get, and it'll make a big difference, or he won't, and it impacts just how good of a prospect he could really be at the NFL level. And that is that ability to wait that one extra little tick to be able to anticipate and understand if A is true, then B and C may be true as well. And you saw this a lot where you might have a Diami Brown as his primary target running some type of 10-yard curl pattern. But if he waits another half a second by recognizing the safety over the top, he might realize that, oh shit, I've got Daz Newsome open on a post 40 yards down the field, and that's actually the throw that I need to make, and I need to trust what I'm reading, trust what I'm seeing. It's a nuance piece, but it can make a big difference for him. And there were times, I think, that because he locked onto the primary read and didn't shift his eyes, didn't move the safeties, that he left some really big plays on the field. Even with the big year statistically that he had in 2020, it could have been even bigger. But I look at him, I get why people are hyped up on him. I was saying initially, I got to somebody on Twitter about this, and they said, Baker Mayfield, and initially I was like, after watching a couple of games, I'm like, no, not really. I see more Matthew Stafford type of traits. As I watched him more, though, I will digress, and I will back off of that slightly. I totally get the Baker Mayfield comparisons. He even fucking looks like, to some degree, physically, doesn't he? He fucking looks like Baker Mayfield. Now, I think there are differences. I think his arm is a little stronger than Baker Mayfield's, maybe more in line with the Matthew Stafford's. I think there's similar type of athleticism, although I would give a slight edge in terms of pure, functional mobility. Personally, I would give it to Sam Howell. I think accuracy, though, Mayfield has a bit of an advantage. Decision-making, field vision, I would also give that advantage to Baker Mayfield. So it doesn't line up perfectly as a prospect. I see some traits of Baker, yes. I see some traits of Matthew Stafford. I can see the first-round hype for Sam Howell. I really can. Where I hesitate a little bit is when I start hearing number one overall pick type of hype for him. I don't know that the physical tools are that great. I don't know that the accuracy is good enough. I don't know that you have enough upside there to look at him and say that this is a guy that you should be taking number one overall. Now, I say that to say this is June of 2021. We've still got an entire college football season to go. Some of these weaknesses that I've called out, he could work on and focus on and improve somewhat or dramatically. And when I circle back in January or February and do a more official scouting report on Sam Howell, my perspective could change significantly. But as I look at it right now, this feels like a quarterback that you maybe take more in the middle of round one than you do at the top of round one. Because you do have some traits there that suggest he could be a franchise level dude. I'm just not quite sure that he has those elite traits, those elite tools that suggest he could be an elite prospect that you would beat yourself up if you couldn't get him at number one overall.